better for you. But thank you for coming to this. This is something that, if you don't remember, this is Veterans Day. Woohoo! And this is something we've done actually for the last few years, where, in fact, since I've been here, where we have had some veterans from the community. In fact, every one of these people that you see on stage has some connection here with Argyle High School. And, but they're also veterans. And they're here to share their thoughts, their experiences with you, and also give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you want. And so, so think about those questions as we're doing this. First, as we start off, I'm going to give each one of these people a chance to introduce themselves, give a little bit of background on who they are, and then we'll just launch right into questions, and hopefully this will be time well spent for all of you. The one thing I do ask, though, we're going to send the microphone around when you're asking questions, but please do speak up and enunciate for us. As you can tell, we're not all as young as we once were, and since a lot of us do have combat experience, we can't hear as well as we once could either. So please speak up for us and let us hear your question. And without any further ado, yeah, what do you say? Let's go ahead and get started.
Hey, good morning. I'm Jack Leach. My wife teaches here at Argyle. We've got two children. They're 22 and 20, and so just a little bit about myself. I was 25 years active duty in the Army, and back when I was 17 or 18 years old, didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, and I was kind of making some questionable decisions in high school. And so one of my friends said he was joining the National Guard, and said that I should join the reserve so we could go through like basic training together. So we ended up doing that. We both went through 1 year of college at the University of Kentucky, and then we went through basic training. We're fortunate enough to get a 3-year ROTC scholarship, and so spent 3 years in ROTC, and then I was commissioned as a medical service corps officer. So I tried to get in the Air Force Academy, and they wouldn't let me in, and got a couple of graduates up here on the stage. And so you gotta be really smart, and you gotta have your stuff together. And I didn't have that when I was 18, but it was a good path that I went through anyway. But I was medical service corps, so I was able to go and apply to flight school. So I got into flight school, flew medical evacuation, flew Blackhawks for about 15 years, and then the second part of my career, a little bit less exciting. I did hospital administration and like information technology those last few years as I rounded out my career. So glad to be with you guys today, and don't hold back on the questions. Ask whatever you want to.
Good morning, I'm Marcus Doyle. I've got 5 kids in Argyle. Darian, who's a junior, Hannah, sophomore. I've got an 8th grader and twins in 5th grade. So a little bit about myself. I joined the National Guard first when I was 17 years old. Then I joined the regular Army afterwards. Became a military policeman, went to Europe, came back, went to Fort Sam, did some fun schools. I joined the military for a different reason. I had a calling. My father served for 25 years. So my brother and I both joined, following those steps, but we joined for different reasons. I joined so I could have money to go to college afterwards. I joined so that I could experience the world and jump out of planes. So you'll find today that you'll find lots of reasons that we all joined, and then also why we got out and why we made a career. I did not go to the academy. I did not have that money, and I wasn't that smart. But I could shoot, and I could hunt, and I thought I was tough to play sports and all that stuff, so I thought I could just go into the Superman. How many of you all in here have a parent in the military? Quite a few. Last class about the same. Please tell your parents I said thank you for their service. And then also today, I would ask that you think about those people that have your classmates and stuff, and it is Veterans Day. We are not a recruiting group. I said that in the last group, I think it's important. We're not here to recruit you for the military. Some of us have different opinions if you guys should even do it or not. If you want to join Mcnulty, we'll help you, right? If you want to hear other sides from a military brat or a military person, we're here. So ask all the questions you want today. And thanks for being here.
Good morning. I'm Matt Buckett. First of all, are there any wrestlers here? Or any? Okay, I see my son back there. We got a couple more here. I'm going to blame you guys for my loss, my lack of voice, because I went to the meeting last night and screamed like crazy cheering for Argyle. So I'm struggling a little bit today. A little bit about myself. I'm a 20-year Air Force veteran. I went to the United States Air Force Academy. Played football my freshman year, ran track all 4 years there. Kind of knew I wanted to fly airplanes from growing up in a military family, and that seemed like the best way for me to get to that goal. So I was always kind of laser focused on going to the academy and serving in the military, and the career thing just kind of worked out. I flew mainly transport airplanes throughout my career, 5 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. I do have 2 kids in Argyle High School. I've got Corey, who's a senior, and then I've got Larissa, who's a sophomore. Look forward to your questions. We're kind of making intros short because your questions are the best part of the day.
Next, stand up. Army guys, get up slow. Clark Mcnulty. I'm actually from Argyle. I grew up here. I joined the military. I served 8 years, 8 months in various places and in various capacities. I am a strong proponent of military service. It's not all about shooting guns and jumping out of airplanes. I was lucky enough to get to do that, but they also have dentists and veterinarians and clerical workers and lawyers and doctors. And I think that the United States military is the absolute greatest organization on the planet.
Nicole Summers, U.S. Army. I did 6 years. I'm from Southern California. I knew at 17 that I did not want to stay in California. And who can blame me, right? Texas is better. So I got in a bunch of trouble in high school. I went to like 8 different schools, and I just knew I needed a way out. And the Army was that way for me. So I have 2 kids in Argyle, 1 6th grader and 1 3rd grader, and I look forward to all your questions.
Hi. I think some of you know me. It's good to see this crew over here, the seniors. How y'all doing? Corey, I miss you, man. Your dad's amazing. And you're amazing, too.
You're amazing, sir.
Thank you. Oh, me. Thank you. Yeah, most of you know me. If you don't know me, I'm Stephen Orlowski, U.S. Army Reserve. A lot of you know my story. Either I told you last year or I've told you this year, right? So I joined the Army out of high school. And I'm sorry, some of you teachers have to hear the same horrible joke I make. It's just like teaching, right, Mr. Woody? Exactly. So, you know, when I was your age, I hate saying that, but when I was your age, I knew probably 2 things for sure in my life. Well, 3. Number 1, I probably was not going to play in the National Hockey League, so I needed a fallback plan, right? So, 1, I knew in some capacity, way, shape, or form, I probably wanted to become a teacher. And I'll leave all that sort of story out. But number 2, I had this desire to serve my nation and serve in the military in some capacity. And I thought it would pan out completely different, that I want to look at going to a service academy, that I want to look at going through ROTC. And eventually I decided no, but my parents were probably super motivated and excited too because they viewed the military for me as a way to pay for college. So that was kind of another variable, if you want to look at that, for me joining the military. So a lot of you guys, I've told my story. You know I spent a year in Iraq with Operation Iraqi Freedom. I was there when everything started. I've told you in class how, you know, I had a completely different outlook on life with that year that I experienced in the desert. So I would say for Veterans Day, the biggest thing I could give you, and I think it's one of the things, and there are many, that make our nation truly great, is that everybody up here, you know, in our military today, we made the choice to serve, right? That's just something that's inside of you, and that burning desire that you have where you say, I want to serve my nation or serve my country. And some of you in this room will experience that, because I know that some of you will go on to serve in some capacity. So I think that's what's most important about Veterans Day today, is remember to tell the people thank you, because they made that choice, right? They made that choice to answer that call to serve, and that goes from there. So we'll open for questions and we'll go from there.
Yep, we'll open in just a second. I'll just quickly introduce myself. A lot of you I do know. I've been around here, so I am Paul Kearney, and I am in charge of this Argyle ISD Police Department. There we go. Okay, but for a lot of you who don't know, though, before this life, before I came here to Argyle, I was 21 years as an officer in the U.S. Air Force. I had the tremendous fortune of being able to go to the Air Force Academy. Had to kind of take the long route. I went to the prep school first because my grades weren't all that. But hey, I still got there. So graduated from '92 and served the next 21 years as an officer. When I was there at the academy, I actually planned on being a pilot, but after being in a few cockpits and puking my guts out every time, I thought, no, time for some other gig. So that's why I joined the Security Forces career field, which was, and still is, the law enforcement branch of the Air Force plus nuclear security, base security, flight line security, anti-terrorism, and such. So essentially, we're kind of the infantry of the Air Force, if you will. And so, even though I'm definitely Air Force, and that's where I came from, a lot of my experiences are much closer to what my Army friends here have right here, and I feel a very close bond with them as well. Why did I sign up? You know, my dad was career military. He was 27 years as an officer. His father was in the Air Force in World War II, so I just really felt a call to serve and serve this country and serve whichever way I could. So I always really wanted to be in the military. I weighed 145 pounds soaking wet when I graduated from high school, so I definitely was not football material at the Air Force Academy, but I was a lacrosse player, so I got recruited to do that, and that for me was a dream come true, being able to go there. So from there, I think we can open it up for questions, and the time is yours. So please, have at us.
The last group's asked some great questions.
Yes, it is. So the challenge is high.
Yeah. We're doing
All
this.
right, don't be shy here, people. Don't be shy. You too.
What was your favorite part about serving in the military?
That is a tremendous question. What's our favorite part about serving?
Yeah, it's, yeah, there's the favorite part, there's a lot of ways I can answer this, but I think that my favorite part of it is the camaraderie and the teamwork. It's just the people that I got to meet and the relationships that I got to build. We've talked quite a bit this morning about their, you know, it was never about the medals, and it was never about the recognition, you know, that I got. And for some of us that served in Iraq and Afghanistan these last 20 years, there was a lot of that because we were deployed a lot. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's really the memories of the people that were like there, that you had a bunk next to you, that you went through some type of training with, mainly the people you deployed with. And that is really probably just the favorite memory, and therefore it makes it like the favorite part of my entire time in 25 years active plus 3 years in RTC. That's what really is going to stand with me the longest.
Great question. Mine was friendships, hands down. Still friends with the same people today that I served with, either basic training in Germany, in Fort Sam, jumped out of a plane with, whatever it is. We talked about this morning, started at 5 something this morning. My phone started going off from the people that maybe I haven't seen in 20 years, and we're still like this. It's also the other veterans that you meet along the way that you realize you have a bond with that nobody else understands. And then the second part of my favorite part was the mission. I actually enjoyed it. I liked the fact of coming together as a team, as a group, and whatever that mission was. If it was Reforger, if it was a combat mission, if it was something as simple as I was a military policeman, if it was working a drug task force in Europe, which I got to do, or working executive protection. So I got the blessing of doing a lot of different pieces in my career. So I think the mission, because it made your friends even closer. You're all at the same goal, and you knew that no matter what, you were all going to do whatever it took to make it happen.
So I'm not going to say the same things they just said but that's obviously the biggest part of it. Most of us will always say is the people. But for me, like the single best moments of my Air Force career were coming home. So when you've done your deployment, you've done your time, and you get to come home, you get to see the people that you're deploying for. That moment of getting off the plane and seeing them, that's probably the best single moment.
We're all probably going to say the same things. Yeah. Who's your best friend right now? When it's your turn to sit up here, you're probably going to have a hard time remembering their name. It's the fact. The people that you served in the military with remain with you always, because that's a deeper bond than I think I've ever had with someone I wasn't married to. And the experiences The experiences were awesome. The military allowed me to experience many countries. I got to guard the President of the United States, the Queen of Spain. I got to go to the '94 Olympics. And just things like that are the things that I remember the most. And it was the single greatest experience of my life.
For me, obviously, it's the people. It's the people for everyone. But that's no matter if you go off to college, it's going to be the people that you remember, the friends that you make. I think that the best part was being able to care for myself, buying my own stuff, having a routine, and just being in charge of myself at the same time, but following something. That was the best part.
What do you think I'm going to say? People, of course. When I got married, one of the guys that was on my wedding party was somebody that I had only met when I joined the military, and we were deployed together, and he still is one of my best friends to this day. So people, and then I would say, and I think I told a lot of you this before, you know, I got a harsh dose of reality at the age of 20 when everything happened. And so I'm very thankful that I learned a lot of lessons at such a young age in my life that gave me a totally different outlook on life from my deployment. And I just learned to be thankful for what I have and appreciate things, because until you lose those things, you don't know what it's like. And so probably just that real world mentality in that sense, and then yeah, definitely people, of course.
Yeah, absolutely the people. Whether it's classmates of mine from the academy that I'm still in touch with, and people that I served with. In fact, as I'm sitting here, I'm getting a text from my top senior master sergeant, who was my right-hand man when I was at Baghdad. What connections we have. Shared experiences and shared, sometimes fears, getting through difficulties together, sharing joys together. It's always the people. I mentioned to you before that, you know, my dad was also prior Air Force and served for 27 years. 2 years ago when we had this panel at the other building, my dad happened to be in town, so I invited him to be a part of that. And it's one thing to have a father-son relationship, but now he and I also have that brotherhood, if you will, of being career military officers, sharing those experiences. Our relationship is now at a whole new level. How many people were at the football game last Friday? Okay. A lot of these people were the ones that were on the field with me prior to the game, saluting the colors. A lot of the people that came down, we had 32 of us this year, a lot of them that came down, I didn't know their backgrounds, but we had this in common, that we all served together. And to be able to get together and just salute the colors, a simple thing like that, just means the world to those of us that got to do that. Just because we have that bond together. Absolutely, it's the people that we think about. All right, next question.
The gentleman in the back, the shades.
What was one of the tough decisions you had to make when in the military?
I think it's just one, right?
Toughest decisions. I could go into great detail on this, but I'll try to kind of keep it high level. When I was going, I was in command as a major. This was in 2004. I just come back from Iraq. I just got notified I was going to take command, and our sister unit, it was an air ambulance company, again medical evacuation. They had 15 helicopters, 150 people. They had lost 3 aircraft, and on the 6th of January 2004, they had one of their helicopters shot down by an SA-18 missile. It's like a telephone pole coming at you. And so they lost those 4 crew members plus the 3 casualties on the back of the aircraft. So when we got to Kuwait, we were supposed to go through this 3-week training program to prove to the authorities that be in the Army, because there's a lot of bureaucracy in the military, to prove to them that we could go into Iraq and perform our mission. I knew that my unit could do that. I was in charge. And so I essentially, I gotta say this kind of politically correct, I evaded some of the authorities there in Kuwait, and I essentially got my entire unit on some Marine Corps C-130s and got into Iraq. I'd been there before, so at least I was comfortable with the environment. But making that decision, I could have lost my command, I knew the commander on the ground needed to be relieved of his responsibilities, and I got there and that unit was just in disarray. I mean, they were just emotionally spent. They'd been there for, I think at that point, 13 months, and they needed to go. So it was a really difficult decision. I knew that we were prepared to do the mission. I knew that we could do it. We didn't need an extra 2 weeks in the sandbox as it might be looked at. So I made the decision to do it. I caught some flack for it once I got up there, but at the end of the day, I knew it was the right thing, and I was able to send that commander and those 150, member team back home to Colorado, which is where they needed to be.
I'll make mine a little bit more lighthearted. When you're in Europe, you don't have as many days off, so you say what's called leave. And I was running out of leave, and I was trying to figure out, did I want to spend as a single man New Year's saying Bon Mani in Paris, or did I want to go to Munich for Oktoberfest?
There you go.
Hard to follow that one. It's their toughest decision. I would say that when you're dealing with people, especially as an officer, the hardest decision to make were the ones that affected people, because for us it's not, someone's got to go, and you'd love to send yourself, but in some situations you can't. You have to pick somebody. You have to say, hey, I'm sorry, I need someone to do this mission, and it's going to affect their family. It's going to affect their situation, because you can't send somebody away and not have it affect them at all. And so those decisions where I had to, as a leader, choose the person that was going to go, that was the toughest decision for me.
That will help you with the decision between an officer and enlisted.
Yes.
Enlisted, you're the one that's going. Officer, they're the smart guys that are sending the rest of us to go do that.
And that's exactly where I was going.
In the Army.
I served a little bit different, but actually Mark's, and I'm very similar, is we served in airborne infantry units. The decisions that have to be made on the ground, not in the air, not back in an office somewhere, but on the spot when things are going and you have to train for it. Sometimes somebody has to cover your rear, and there's something out there called the greater good. For the good. Mission first, people always, is what they say. And if the mission requires you to hold that post, you hold that post. And inevitably, not everybody's going to make it. If, in a perfect world, everybody would. But those are the kinds of decisions that military commanders have to make. Thank God the only decisions that I had to make only affected me and maybe my battle buddy. But it's a terrible position to be in. But they're decisions that are made for the greater good of the mission.
Mine's a little different. So back in 2010, I had my first baby. Well, shortly after, we get orders to Iraq. Our mission was to close Iraq. I was a supply sergeant, so I had to go. I was my commander's right hand. We had to take inventory for everything. So the toughest choice for me was I going to stay with my brand new baby, or was I going to leave her behind? Okay, I'm not going to cry. So my choice was, I left. I left my daughter for almost a year. It was about 9 months and some change. And that was the toughest decision for me. Did I want to leave my unit hanging and have some PFC take them, or was I going to man up and go? I went.
I get my own exclusive microphone. I'll go a different direction because people have said some things, but it may sound kind of dumb, but probably one of the hardest decisions I had to make was actually to join. That was the first big hurdle to jump over. Was I willing to spend the summer after my senior year going through basic training and doing everything, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to start college that August, and was I okay to do that until you kind of get there and go through the pleasurable experience at MEX in Dallas, which is not pleasurable. And then you go and you get sworn in. I mean, that it's real at that point. So I think just finally taking the steps to do that, and it's one thing to talk about it, right? Yo, I'm going to join, but when you actually go through and do it, I think that's the first hurdle. And so the other one, and I've told these guys this year, I know you know this, but I was in basic training. I joined a peacetime army. And so I was in basic training on September 11th of 2001. And when it happened, we all were kind of dumb and naive, and I was just talking with Mr. Woody about this too, is that some people right then and there wanted to quit. Because we had joined a peacetime army, and a bunch of us, mostly kids, had never thought anything like this would ever happen. We joined to get college paid for and whatnot. And I remember there were people that did quit. They opened up a very slim window, and of course it wasn't very pleasurable, but we all kind of got sat down and told, did you not understand the commitment you made and what that meant? And I mean, you understood, but you didn't understand until that day. And I told you guys this year and the others, I would be a liar if I told you that that thought of ringing the bell or whatnot did not cross my mind right then and there. But I made a commitment, right? I knew I wanted to serve. None of us ever thought any of that would ever happen, but it did. And so when they asked, what did you sign up for? That kind of hit home, because you did sign up for this, right? And so I think that was a tough decision too, that probably weighed on everybody's mind that was there in that room that day of, did I know what I was getting myself into? Not knowing that that decision would change the complete trajectory of my life from there, So I'd say that was a tough one too, but something that, no, Orlowskis are not quitters, right? I made a commitment. I knew I wanted to do it, and so I stuck with it. And so I think for a lot of people, that, not just me, that was a tough decision that people certainly had to make that day.
It's an interesting question that you ask as far as a difficult decision. And, for leadership in general, you got to be willing to make those difficult decisions. If you can't do that, you got no business being a leader. In the military, I think that's especially so, because no kidding, lives can depend on the decisions you make. I'll give you an example of that. This was when I was in Baghdad, and so this was in 2008. And so I was in charge of the Air Force contingent that we had there. We're the police force for the international zone. But we answered to an Army organization. So my bosses there were all, it was an Army Brigadier General with his colonels there that were his support. One of these colonels approached me one morning and said, hey, we got to talk in private. Okay, not a problem. Go in. He says, I'm in his office. Says, I got a combat operation I'm ready to hand to you. Are you ready to take it? Now, tell me guys, was there a taunt in that? Okay, Army guys handing a combat op to Air Force guys. Of course there was a taunt in that, but I wasn't going to let it go. I was like, yes, sir, we'll take it. What do you need? So, not to bore you with too many of the details, but what they had found out was that there was a safe house in the international zone that some of the insurgents were using against us. And our job was to take that safe house, raid it, capture anybody in it, and then collect whatever intelligence that we could get. There was more to it, but I won't bore you with it. But in any case, so they give this operation to me to lead, and they put a quick reaction team at our disposal to use and such, but it's mine to develop this operation, put it together, and execute it. So we did, and of course I bring in my senior leaders to help me put the whole operation together. And of course we had to have a team on the outside to watch our backs. We also had to have our teams our apprehension teams that as soon as we grabbed one of the insurgents, they'd haul them back, stuff them, cuff them, put bags on the heads, haul them to the rear and such like that. The tougher part though was who's going to be the team that would actually go into that house. And more critically, who was going to lead them into that house. Because that person that was going into that was probably going to be the one that was going to die, if anybody did. Okay, me as the commander, I had to manage the whole thing. So I couldn't be me. I couldn't be the one to do it. I had to pick the one to go into that. And the one I picked was The senior master sergeant, in fact, ironically, I'll blow the story for you. The guy that just texted me, he's the guy. He's the guy that I picked. And I pulled him aside and I said, senior master sergeant, I said, senior, I said, I want you to be the first one in that door. And I'll tell you why. I said, one, because you're a leader. These are all young guys. They've never been in a situation like this. They need somebody they can follow. And he was a friend of mine, by the way. And the fact that he would just immediately, without even hesitating, yes, sir, knowing what he was getting into. You want to know what brings us together as military members? It's moments just like that. And by the way, he did a phenomenal job. He scared the crap out of those people in that building when he went in. And then, I won't again bore you with the details, but it was an excellent operation. I'm proud of those guys to this day for carrying that one out. But that, you want a hard decision, you pick the guy that goes through that door. That weighed on me like crazy, but I know I picked the right guy when it all came down. Excellent, excellent question. Thank you so much. All right, next one, another question.
So what surprised you the most when you first joined?
I'm sorry, say it again, please.
So what surprised you the most when you first joined?
What surprised?
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's a good question. Okay, when we first joined, wow, what was that moment of clarity? What was that like, oh crud, what have I just gotten myself into?
So I told the story, I think first period. I went to the academy, and so your parents basically, like college, they had to drop you off. Well, we got dropped off at a facility that was not where we were going to go through basic training at, and then we took a bus to basic training. So I get on the bus, like any good kid, I smile, look at my parents, and my girlfriend, future wife at the time, smile at her, and as soon as I turned back around, one of the upperclassmen that was going to be my instructor for the next 6 weeks was about 4 inches from my face. And he started yelling at me and screamed out. It was about 45 seconds that he screamed at me. And he left, and the gist of what he was saying was, hey, you're mine, you don't get to smile unless I tell you to smile. So he walks away, and so I'm sitting there for a second. I turn and look at my family again, smile. He never left my face for the next 10-minute bus ride. So that's when I knew I was not under the care of my parents anymore.
Yeah, probably along those lines too, because again, I was your age when I enlisted. And so like probably the most interesting thing was the fact that when I left to go to basic training, that was the first time I'd really left mommy and daddy's wings, if you will say, right? The first time I was truly independent and on my own, and what better place to be under the care of Uncle Sam in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So yeah, it was probably the fact that mom and dad weren't there anymore when you join. And for the first real time, it's just you. And so I think making that adjustment, especially when it's right out of high school and you have a comfort, nice life, that was definitely eye-opening. Probably the first real true thing that made me just go, wow.
For me, it was realizing how small my bubble, I guess, in California actually was. Going to basic and seeing the different cultures and the different colors of people, I was shocked. Seriously. There was so many accents I didn't understand. I come from Southern California where it's mainly Hispanic. I was just shocked at the amount of people that I never thought I would see ever in my life.
I joined in the 80s, and I fancied myself a musician, and I played in what is now referred to as a hair band. So you think, give me a guitar. So imagine the motley crew, the big hair was long, and the Army remedied that day one with a new haircut, and that I still have to this day. But that was kind of my, oh boy, here we go.
I think that a moment that I can think of wasn't during basic training so much. See, I grew up, like I said, in a military environment. My father was military. My brother had gone into the Air Force Academy 2 years prior to me, and I grew up in that area, so I knew a ton of cadets and such. So I kind of knew mentally what to expect as far as basic training and such was concerned. And it was tough, make no mistake, but it was, we got somebody screaming at you for you didn't do anything wrong, and you still get screamed at, yeah, that kind of sucks. Well, one thing is that one of the guys in the previous session, Scotty Zamza, happened to mention it. It really triggered something in my mind. Was a program that we had to go through SEER, or SEER, depending on how you want to call it. Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. And part of that is you are basically a prisoner of war. And you're essentially being tortured, for lack of a better word. And you have to resist giving any information. And it is, I mean, it's only a few days you're in there, but it seems like a freaking eternity. You don't sleep at all. They don't feed you. I mean, so you're starving, you're exhausted, you're getting maltreated in ways I don't even want to explain to you. But to show us what it's like if we were to get captured and if we were actually a prisoner of war. And for me, that was a huge moment of clarity. Because you think about the people, in fact, if you ever see the movie Hanoi Hilton, boy, what those guys went through in Vietnam when they were captured was just, would have been 6-7 years of pure misery. And that's one of those things I had to think to myself was, if this happens to me, do I have what it takes? It's one thing to die. It's over. To have to live through that would be pure unadulterated hell. Did I have what it took to really put up with that, to be able to survive something like that? Did I have the guts to take that? And I had to really do some soul searching on that to make sure I had what it took. And I stayed with it, and I'm glad I did. All right. Other questions? How much time do we have? About 6 minutes. Okay, we'll make it quick.
How do you think that seeing the world through a military viewpoint changed your views of humanity?
Did you hear that? How did being in the military and seeing the world from that perspective change your view of humanity?
Oh, okay. I think that's a brilliant question. Okay, because a lot of us have traveled and seen other things. How did being in the military change our perspectives?
So I think this one is the same. If you go on a missions trip, if you've been to some of the third world countries and you see how people live, and you don't realize how blessed and how privileged you are and we are to live in the United States, that just seeing that firsthand changes you, and it can't not change you, because they have so little and they give so much, whereas we have so much and we want more, and it's a different perspective of the way you think. And so for me, just being able to, whether or not it was experience or whether it was just to observe all those different places. And I've been to 5 of the 7 continents. And so seeing all those different people groups, how they live, what's important to them, that changed my worldview.
Yeah,
Let's go to the next.
Yeah.
That was a great answer.
That was a good one. Something you said that kind of, and I'll bring this one up too. And it kind of answers the question, maybe kind of doesn't, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to tell you a little story about, going back to Baghdad, one of my interpreters that I had. Now, she swore she was 18 years old. I would have said 16. She was so young and just seemed, like, what are you doing here working for us? But her English was not only phenomenal, but she was one of those that, if it was one of those really critical moments, that's the one I asked for, because she got it. She just kind of knew what I was really trying to say. And so she was one of the best interpreters I had. Well, after I'd been there for a little while, she came into my office and says, "Colonel, can you help me with something?" I said, "Yeah, of course I can." She says, "Are you aware that we can get a fast-track visa if we serve our time as interpreters for you?" I said, "I didn't know that, but if you want my help in doing that, absolutely. I'll be more than happy to help you." She said, "Okay, I just need a letter from you, just to support me and just to verify what I've done." I said, "Yeah, glad to." I said, "But if I'm going to do that for you, I need a couple of things from you. One, I need to know your real name." They all use different names, because if they got captured, they didn't want people to know who they actually were. That's the skin in the game that these interpreters had, all these Iraqi interpreters. Second thing, so I said, "I need to know your real name." I said, "Second thing is, give me just some information on your background, just so I can kind of personalize this a little bit and kind of add a little bit more punch to this letter." So sure enough, the next day she gives me just a few handwritten pages of notes from her upbringing and what she had been through and what her motivation was. I sat there with tears in my eyes reading it. Because this young girl knew what the term sacrifice really meant, because she and her family, these Iraqis, had lived it under Saddam for all those years. Her family had sacrificed. Many of her family members had died and been tortured by Saddam. And yet here's this young girl working for us the way she was. And I told her, not only will I, it is my pleasure to write this letter for you. And so I did. Fast forward a few years, I'm sitting here and on Facebook, and I see this weird friend request come up, and it sounded like one of those Russian war bride ones that you get, you know, that one of those sorts of things. I'm like, yeah, whatever, delete. Well, sure enough, later I get this message, and guess who it was? It was actually this interpreter. And she had not only come to the United States, she wanted to reach out to me just to stay in contact. She had not only come to the United States, she had enlisted in the Army. That young girl is a patriot like nobody I've ever seen. She wasn't born an American, but man, she is as American as we get because she knows what it is to sacrifice. She knows what it is to ache, to give something for your country and to give for our country. And God bless her, we're still in touch now, even all these years later. She left the Army after enlistment, but she did. She moved into other work and is just doing a great job as a linguist and doing intelligence and stuff like that. So again, it's kind of a random way of answering your questions, but when you ask that, changing the viewpoint, that young girl had it. She knows what sacrifice is. She knows what patriotism is, and she's just, you can tell, energizes me thinking about who this young girl is as an interpreter, what she sacrificed for us. Wow. All right, how much time do we have? I know I killed a lot of time on that. What's that? Okay, it's about time to go.
Let's do another question.
Okay, it's one more? Okay. One more question then.
Just want to make sure you'll have time to beat the lines.
We'll just skip,
We'll just kind of push it right up.
That's true. That's what I do.
Were there any other branches you considered joining before you chose the one you chose?
Absolutely not.
Or you can talk about also what are the considerations when you choose a branch.
Okay, my dad was career Air Force. I had a great uncle that was, he was Army Air Corps when it became the Air Force. And then between my nephew, that's now at the Air Force Academy, my family has had since we became the Air Force, has had a member in it. And so, no, I didn't think about anything else.
I wanted to join the Marines before I joined the Army, and reason being was one of my high schools I was in ROTC. I was on the all-female ROTC drill team, and I just loved every moment of it. The only reason why I joined the Army, honestly, was because all other offices were closed that day. It was Labor Day, and for whatever reason, the Army was open because someone was in trouble and they had to work.
The government never rests. Yeah, so crazy story, I guess, when I went in, I was medically disqualified from the Air Force. I dealt with chronic ear problems and hearing as a kid. And so I have a slight hearing impairment in my right ear. If you guys ever want to see, I have a pretty cool scar back here. I can tell you that story some other time. So the Air Force was not an option. And so the Navy, with my luck, I'd get stuck in a submarine, and that scared me more than anything, being in a submarine and being underwater and anything like that. So the Navy, no. So it was down to the Army or the Marines. And I really considered the Marines because Grandpa Orlowski was a Marine in World War II and served on Iwo Jima. And so I considered keeping that going. And probably the biggest reason that I stuck with the Army was I could pick my job. And so that was probably, in the end, the biggest motivator when I enlisted was that I got to choose my job, where in Marines it was really not so simple. So that was me.
My father served in the Navy, in the submarines, and I knew I didn't want to go underwater on purpose for months at a time. And every time I got in anything bigger than a canoe, I got seasick. I didn't really know anything about the Air Force. If I had it to do all over again, and if my kids ever tell me they want to join the military, it'd probably be the Air Force. My ASVAB score was too high for the Marines. Any Marines in the room? So that was double digit. And, but I, basically the same thing. I actually pre-qualified for flight school to fly Apache helicopters. And I failed the hearing test about 2 weeks into Camp Rucker, and by that time there were no other slots, and I ended up in the infantry because once you sign the contract, you have to serve whether you get to do what you want or not.
No, Army all the way. I was the toughest guy in high school. I had no problem telling you. And I knew that to be the very best, you wanted to be the best group there was, and that was the United States Army. That's from an Army guy, right? So if I was smarter, I'd have been in the Air Force, right? I'm not gonna go on the Mcnulty side, but I knew from my personality that was the right choice for me. And each person has to make that choice based on their own personality. I wasn't getting on a sub, I wasn't getting on a ship, right? And I wasn't just charging a hill for no reason. And the second choice was because of the fact you get to pick based on your scores of the ASVAB, you can choose what your job is, as long as a recruiter doesn't talk you into something else, which they will all try and do. So I made it a point to say, I will not join unless I'm a military policeman. I will not join unless I go to airborne school. I will not join unless I go. And they went check, 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 check. You can do all those things.
Yeah, these are funny, good answers and some funny comments here. But I think I said before, I tried to get the Air Force Academy, and I mean, it's a super, super hard school to get into. I'm sure some of you know this. That a lot of these guys are kind of making it seem like they just walked right in, but it's a special cut to get in there. But what I would say is, and the Army is so big, there are so many jobs out there, it's just a gigantic organization, so it gives you a few more options, where the Marine Corps is the smallest of the services, I believe. I think the Marine Corps is a little bit smaller than the Air Force. But the one thing I would, if any of you do consider it, I would just look at the cultures, because as much camaraderie as we have up here on the stage, there really is a lot of different kind of subcultures. And you can be kind of a special breed to be a Marine. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And you've got to kind of deal with some of the flack you get when you're in the Army, because we're kind of like, they call us the knuckle draggers. We're not always the smartest group, but we have a lot of capabilities. We can get a lot of stuff done. So just look at the whole picture, and I encourage you all to ask. We're not trying to recruit you here at all, but ask people like us that have been there, kind of done it, if you do get serious about maybe making a career or spending maybe one enlistment, 4 or 5 years in the military.
And there's other academies besides the Air Force Academy. We just have these up here. But West Point grad right there sitting there too. So you can think of that also as the other academies, the Naval Academy,
Coast Guard.
Yeah. West Point.
They're absolutely bonkers.
As I mentioned before, my dad was in the Air Force. My brother was in the Air Force. I had an aunt and uncle in the Air Force. My grandfather had served in the Air Force. So that's why I made it my decision to join the Navy. Surprise. I just wanted to do something different. I had nothing against the Air Force, but I said, no, I want to join the Navy. I didn't get accepted to the Naval Academy. So I thought, fine, I'll do ROTC. So I was planning on doing Navy ROTC at University of Texas, down there in Austin. So that was my plan. And then I got a late-breaking appointment to the Air Force Academy Prep School, and it didn't take me half a second to decide what I wanted to do. I thought the Air Force was a great gig, but yeah, I just kind of wanted to do something a little bit different. But once I got that opportunity, I knew what I was wanting to do. It's funny because at one point my dad even had said, because it did look like the Naval Academy was going to work out or anything like that. He's like, hey, have you ever thought about joining the Army? And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a soldier. Oh yeah, okay. So what did I end up getting into in the Air Force? Yeah, basically the infantry of the Air Force. So there we go. All right, very good. I think, is that about it then? Okay, very good. Again, thank you.
No, he wants to
He wants to
This is not related.
I hate to be that teacher, but my 4th period class, if you have your assignment that's due, you can come put that right up here on the stage. You're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hey, if you don't have it done, you may give it to me on Monday.
Minus 10 points. Minus 50 points.
Well, don't give away my secrets. That was it.
Okay, so for the rest of you who don't have an assignment that's due just now, thank you so much for your attention. We appreciate the time that we got to spend with you today. So have a wonderful day.